The sun beat down on Dust Gulch, baking the wooden buildings and turning the dirt roads into shimmering mirages. A lone tumbleweed bounced down Main Street, a perfect metaphor for Sarah's life, rootless, directionless, and at the mercy of the wind. She stood outside the general store, clutching a worn shawl around her thin shoulders, her gaze fixed on a group of children playing hopscotch nearby. Their laughter, normally a sweet melody, was a painful reminder of what she could never have. Sarah yearned for children of her own. She dreamed of tiny hands grasping hers, of bedtime stories whispered in the soft glow of lamplight, of the unconditional love that only a mother could give. But those dreams were as barren as the desert landscape surrounding Dust Gulch. She was young, barely 20, but in this unforgiving land, youth was a fleeting commodity. A woman's worth was measured by her ability to bear children, to continue the family line, to populate the vast emptiness. And Sarah, through no fault of her own, had failed in that fundamental duty. A shadow fell across her, and she looked up to see her father, his face etched with a mixture of guilt and grim determination. He didn't meet her eyes. "It's time," he mumbled, his voice rough. Sarah's heart sank. She knew what was coming. The whispers had been growing louder, the glances more pitying. The desperation in her parents' eyes had been a constant, gnawing presence. The day she dreaded had finally arrived. Her life, as she knew it, was about to end. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath of the dusty air, and braced herself for the inevitable. Her future was no longer her own. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what its time meant. The whispers had turned into open discussions, the pitying glances into blatant stares. Her infertility, a private sorrow, had become a public burden. In Dust Gulch, a woman who couldn't bear children was seen as incomplete, a broken vessel, a drain on resources. Her parents, decent people at heart, had tried everything: folk remedies, prayers, even a traveling medicine show with its dubious promises. But nothing had worked. The doctor in the next town, a gruff but honest man, had confirmed their worst fears. Sarah would never bear children. The news had devastated her parents, not just for their own dashed hopes of grandchildren, but for Sarah's future. A woman alone in the West had little chance of survival. Marriage was the only path to security, and Sarah's inability to conceive made her virtually unmarriageable. So, they had resorted to the unthinkable. A bargain, whispered in hushed tones, brokered through a shady intermediary. A man, desperate for a wife, willing to overlook Sarah's barrenness in exchange for, well, Sarah herself. The shame of it burned like acid. To be traded like livestock because she couldn't fulfill her God-given purpose. Her father's hand trembled as he reached for her arm. "Come on, Sarah," he said, his voice barely audible. "He's waiting." She resisted, her feet rooted to the ground. A wave of nausea washed over her. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear into the vast, unforgiving landscape. But she knew there was nowhere to go. She was trapped, a pawn in a game she didn't understand, a victim of circumstance and the cruel realities of the West. With a sigh that seemed to carry all the sorrow of the world, she allowed her father to lead her away, toward a future as bleak and desolate as the desert surrounding them. The trading post was a dusty, dimly lit space filled with the smell of leather, spices, and unspoken transactions. Men gathered around a makeshift table, their faces grim, their eyes darting between Sarah and a burly figure standing in the corner. This was Mr. Harding, the man who had agreed to the arrangement. He was older, weathered, and his gaze felt like a brand. Sarah's mother stood beside her, wringing her hands, her face pale and drawn. She avoided Sarah's eyes, focusing instead on a knot in the wooden floor. Her father cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the tense silence. "Mr. Harding," he said, his voice strained, "this is our daughter, Sarah, as we discussed." Mr. Harding grunted, his eyes never leaving Sarah. He circled her slowly, like a buyer inspecting livestock. Sarah felt her skin crawl. She was an object, a commodity to be assessed, not a person with feelings and dreams. She's small, Mr. Harding said, his voice gravelly, and thin. She's strong, her father insisted, his voice tinged with desperation. She can work hard. She's good with her hands. Mr. Harding paused, considering. Then he nodded curtly. All right, the agreed-upon price. The transaction was swift, impersonal. A bag of gold coins changed hands, a paper was signed, and Sarah's fate was sealed. Her parents, their faces a mixture of relief and guilt, offered a few mumbled words of farewell. Her mother, finally meeting her gaze, squeezed her hand, tears welling in her eyes. Be a good wife, Sarah, she whispered. Try to be happy. Sarah wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell them how much they were hurting her. But the words wouldn't come. She was numb, paralyzed by the sheer weight of her situation. She watched as her parents turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd, leaving her alone with a stranger, her life irrevocably altered. She was sold. The reality of it crashed over her, leaving her gasping for air in the suffocating atmosphere of the trading post. Mr. Harding's grip on her arm was rough as he led her out of the trading post and towards a waiting wagon. The looks she received were a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She was a spectacle, a curiosity, a woman whose life had been reduced to a transaction. Each step felt like a betrayal, each glance a confirmation of her worthlessness. As they climbed into the wagon, Sarah looked back at the trading post, a symbol of her shattered dreams. The sun seemed to mock her with its brightness, the vast sky a reminder of her confinement. She was trapped, both physically and emotionally. The weight of her despair was almost unbearable. The ride was long and silent. Mr. Harding offered no words of comfort, no explanation, no sign of humanity. He was a man of few words, it seemed, and Sarah was merely a possession, a tool to be used. The landscape blurred past, a monotonous expanse of scrubland and rocky hills. Sarah felt as barren and empty as the land around her. She closed her eyes, tried to block out the reality of her situation. She imagined herself running, free and unburdened, across the open plains. She pictured a life filled with love and laughter, a family of her own. But the images were fleeting, replaced by the harsh reality of her present circumstances. She was unwanted, rejected, unloved. Even her own parents had deemed her unworthy, trading her away for a handful of gold. The pain of their betrayal was a constant ache in her heart. She was alone, utterly and completely alone, in a world that seemed determined to crush her spirit. The tears streamed silently down her face, a testament to her despair, a symbol of her broken dreams. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew, with a certainty that chilled her to the bone, that it would be filled with hardship and sorrow. Meanwhile, a few miles outside of Dust Gulch, Jedediah was wrestling with a different kind of despair. His ranch, once a thriving homestead, was slowly falling into disrepair. Since his beloved wife, Martha, had succumbed to illness 2 years prior, he'd been struggling to keep everything afloat. 5 children, a sprawling ranch, and a broken heart left him perpetually exhausted and overwhelmed. Jedediah was a good man, a strong and honest man, but the weight of his responsibilities was crushing him. He loved his children fiercely. Little Lily, the eldest at 12, trying her best to mother the younger ones. 10-year-old Samuel, a dreamer with his head always in the clouds. 8-year-old twins, Caleb and Joshua, inseparable and mischievous. And little 4-year-old Ruth, who still missed her mama terribly. He tried his best to be both father and mother, but he knew he was failing. The house was a mess. The meals were simple and often burnt, and the children were running wild. He needed help desperately, but he couldn't afford to hire anyone. Ranch hands were expensive, and a housekeeper was out of the question. So he poured his heart into his work, mending fences, tending to the cattle, and trying to ignore the gnawing loneliness that never seemed to leave him. He was a shadow of his former self, his eyes haunted by grief, his shoulders stooped with weariness. He was a man running on empty, clinging to the hope that somehow, someday, things would get better. He needed a miracle, though he wasn't sure he even believed in them anymore. Today he was in town to purchase some supplies, a trip he always dreaded because it meant leaving the children alone, even for a short time. Jedediah entered the trading post, the familiar scent of leather and dust filling his nostrils. He made his way to the counter, a list clutched in his calloused hand, intending to quickly gather his supplies and return to the ranch. He needed flour, sugar, and a new harness for his oldest mare. But as he waited his turn, a commotion near the back of the room caught his attention. He saw a group of men gathered around a young woman, their faces grim. He couldn't quite make out what was happening, but the tension in the air was palpable. He noticed a young woman, small and frail-looking, standing beside an older man. Curiosity piqued, Jedediah edged closer, trying to get a better view. He heard snippets of conversation, hushed voices, strained words, the clinking of coins. Then he saw the look on a young woman's face, a look of utter despair, of broken dreams, of a soul crushed beneath the weight of circumstance. He watched as her parents, their faces etched with guilt, turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone with the burly man. Jedediah didn't know the details, but he understood enough. He recognized the shame, the desperation, the utter helplessness in her eyes. It mirrored his own grief and loneliness. A wave of compassion washed over him. He saw in her a reflection of his own struggles, his own vulnerability. He couldn't stand by and watch her be treated like an object, a commodity to be bought and sold. He didn't know why, but something inside him compelled him to act. He had to do something, anything, to alleviate her suffering. He felt a stirring in his heart, a flicker of hope in the darkness that had enveloped him since Martha's passing. He knew he couldn't just stand there and watch. Jedediah took a deep breath and stepped forward, his voice surprisingly firm despite the tremor in his hands. "Excuse me, Mr. Harding," he said, addressing the burly man. "I couldn't help but overhear the situation." Mr. Harding turned, his eyes narrowed, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "And what's it to you, mister?" he growled. I have a proposition," Jedediah stammered, his courage wavering slightly under Mr. Harding's intense gaze. He glanced at Sarah, her face pale and drawn, and his resolve hardened. "I'd like to offer Sarah a different kind of arrangement." Mr. Harding scoffed. "You think you can outbid me? I paid good money for this woman." "It's not about money," Jedediah said, his voice rising slightly. "It's about what's right. I'm a widower, Mr. Harding. I have 5 children who need caring for. I can offer Sarah a home, a safe place, and a purpose. Not as a wife," he quickly added, seeing the confusion on Sarah's face. "Not in the traditional sense, but as a caretaker, a helpmate for my children. Someone to help me run the ranch." He turned to Sarah, his eyes filled with sincerity. "There would be no marital expectations, Sarah, no demands on you. Just a chance to have a home, a family, and a purpose. You would be free to leave whenever you wished." The trading post fell silent, everyone staring at Jedediah, stunned by his unexpected offer. Mr. Harding looked bewildered, Sarah looked shocked, and Jedediah, for his part, felt a strange sense of calm amidst the chaos. He had spoken his heart, and now all he could do was wait. He wasn't sure what he was doing, but he knew, deep down, that it was the right thing. He hoped Sarah would see it too. He was offering her a lifeline, a chance to escape a fate she clearly dreaded. Whether she took it was up to her. Sarah stared at Jedediah, her mind reeling. His words were like a cool drink of water in the parched desert of her despair. A real chance to escape the fate that had been thrust upon her. A home, a family, a purpose, without the dreaded expectations of marriage and childbearing. It seemed too good to be true. She glanced at Mr. Harding, his face a mask of anger and frustration. She knew what her life with him would be like, a life of servitude, of loneliness, of constant reminders of her inadequacy. Jedediah's offer, on the other hand, offered a glimmer of hope, a chance to reclaim her life, to find meaning and belonging in a way she never thought possible. She looked back at Jedediah, her eyes searching his for any sign of deception. But she saw only kindness, compassion, and a genuine desire to help. She saw a man who understood her pain, a man who wasn't judging her for her infertility, a man who saw her as a person, not just a vessel. The decision was surprisingly easy. It was as if a weight had been lifted from her shoulders, as if a path had suddenly opened before her. She couldn't explain it, but she knew, with a certainty that surprised even herself, that this was the right thing to do. She took a deep breath and met Jedediah's gaze, her voice trembling slightly. I accept," she said, the words barely audible. "I'll go with you." A collective gasp swept through the trading post. Mr. Harding sputtered in disbelief, but Jedediah simply smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile that reached his eyes. He stepped forward and offered Sarah his hand. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice warm and sincere. "You won't regret this." Sarah took his hand, her heart filled with a mixture of fear and hope. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long time, she felt a flicker of optimism, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things were going to be all right. She was leaving one prison, but she was stepping into the possibility of a new life. The ranch was a far cry from the tidy home Sarah had always dreamed of. It was a sprawling, chaotic place, filled with the sounds of children laughing, arguing, and generally making a joyful mess. The house was in desperate need of repair, the yard overgrown, and the air thick with the scent of wood smoke and something vaguely burnt. As the wagon pulled up to the front porch, 5 children emerged, their eyes wide with curiosity. Lily, the eldest, stood slightly apart, her expression cautious. Samuel, the dreamer, stared at Sarah with wide-eyed wonder. The twins, Caleb and Joshua, bounced with barely contained excitement, while little Ruth clung to Jedediah's leg, her thumb firmly planted in her mouth. Jedediah introduced Sarah to his children, and the initial reactions were mixed. Lily was reserved, unsure of this new woman in their lives. Samuel was friendly and inquisitive, peppering Sarah with questions about her life. The twins were rambunctious and playful, immediately trying to engage her in a game of tag. Little Ruth remained shy and clung to her father, unwilling to let go. The first few days were challenging. Sarah struggled to navigate the chaos of the ranch, to learn the children's routines and quirks, to earn their trust. The house was a disaster, the meals were a struggle, and the laundry seemed never-ending. There were moments when she wondered if she had made a mistake, if she was truly cut out for this life. But there were also moments of unexpected joy. Samuel showing her his collection of rocks, Caleb and Joshua teaching her how to skip stones on the creek, and little Ruth finally venturing close enough to offer her a dandelion. These small moments, these tiny acts of acceptance, gave her the strength to keep going, to persevere through the challenges. She began to see the ranch not as a chaotic mess, but as a place filled with love, laughter, and the potential for a new beginning. And slowly, tentatively, she began to feel like she belonged. As the weeks passed, Sarah blossomed at the ranch. She discovered a natural talent for caring for the children, a nurturing instinct that had been dormant for so long. She mended their clothes, read them stories, and taught them games she had played as a child. She patiently helped Samuel with his reading, encouraged Lily's artistic talents, and even managed to tame the twins' boundless energy with structured activities. Little Ruth, who had initially been so shy, became Sarah's shadow, following her everywhere and showering her with affection. Sarah, in turn, showered Ruth with love and attention, filling the void left by her mother's absence. Jedediah watched in amazement as Sarah transformed his chaotic household into a warm and loving home. The children were happier, healthier, and more well-behaved than he had seen them in years. The house was cleaner, the meals were more nutritious, and the atmosphere was filled with a sense of peace and tranquility. He began to see Sarah not just as a caretaker, but as something more. He saw her kindness, her compassion, her unwavering dedication to his children. He saw her strength, her resilience, and her ability to find joy in the simplest of things. He saw her laughter, her smile, and the way her eyes lit up when she was with his children. He realized that Sarah was more than just a helpmate. She was a remarkable woman, a woman who had overcome incredible hardship, a woman who had a heart of gold. He found himself drawn to her, captivated by her spirit, and grateful for her presence in his life. He started looking forward to their conversations in the evenings, to the shared moments of laughter and quiet companionship. He began to realize that he was falling in love with her. He was seeing her true beauty. It wasn't just in her physical appearance, but in the depth of her soul. He knew she was special, very special, and that he was a lucky man to have her in his life, even if it was just as a caretaker. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a low rumble echoed in the distance. The wind picked up, whipping through the trees, and the air grew thick with an ominous stillness. Jedediah, his brow furrowed with concern, stepped out onto the porch, sniffing the air. "Storm's coming," he said grimly, his voice barely audible above the rising wind. "And it looks like a bad one." Sarah, who had been helping Lily with her mending, joined him on the porch, her eyes scanning the darkening sky. She had seen storms before, but this one felt different, more menacing. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice filled with apprehension. "We prepare," Jedediah replied, his voice firm. "We bring the animals into the barn, secure the house, and make sure the children are safe." And so, they worked together, Jedediah and Sarah, side by side, racing against the approaching storm. They herded the cattle into the barn, secured the windows with wooden shutters, and gathered extra blankets and supplies. The children, sensing the urgency, helped in their own small ways, carrying firewood, filling water buckets, and comforting each other. As the first drops of rain began to fall, the storm unleashed its fury. The wind howled like a banshee, the rain lashed against the house, and the thunder rattled the windows. Jedediah and Sarah huddled together with the children in the main room, trying to keep them calm. Throughout the long night, they faced the storm together, sharing stories, singing songs, and offering each other words of encouragement. Jedediah was amazed by Sarah's strength and resilience. She remained calm and composed, reassuring the children and helping him to stay focused. The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction. But amidst the wreckage, something beautiful had emerged. The shared hardship had strengthened their bond, deepened their connection, and solidified their sense of family. They had faced the storm together, and they had survived. They knew they could face anything as long as they had each other. Despite the growing warmth within the ranch, a chill settled in from the outside world. News of Sarah's arrangement with Jedediah had spread like wildfire through Dust Gulch and the surrounding communities. The townsfolk, ever quick to judge, whispered and gossiped, their tongues wagging with speculation and disapproval. Sarah and Jedediah's unconventional living situation became the subject of much scrutiny. Some pitted Sarah, viewing her as a fallen woman, a charity case taken in by a lonely widower. Others condemned her, accusing her of impropriety and questioning her motives. They wondered aloud what kind of example she was setting for the children. Jedediah, too, faced his share of criticism. Some accused him of taking advantage of Sarah's vulnerability, of exploiting her situation for his own benefit. Others simply shook their heads, lamenting his poor judgment and predicting that his arrangement would end in disaster. The whispers and glances followed them everywhere they went. When Sarah went to town for supplies, the shopkeepers treated her with disdain, their eyes filled with suspicion and judgment. When Jedediah attended church, the other parishioners avoided him, their faces etched with disapproval. Even the children felt the sting of societal judgment. They overheard whispers and taunts from other children, who called Sarah names and questioned her relationship with their father. Lily, especially, struggled with the gossip, feeling ashamed and embarrassed by the attention. The constant scrutiny and judgment created a sense of tension and discomfort within the ranch. Sarah, who had finally begun to feel like she belonged, started to doubt herself again. She wondered if she was doing the right thing, if she was causing more harm than good. Jedediah, too, felt the weight of the community's disapproval. He knew that their arrangement was unconventional, but he also knew that it was based on respect, compassion, and a genuine desire to help each other. He longed to defend Sarah's honor, to silence the gossips, but he didn't know how. The societal pressure was mounting, threatening to shatter the fragile peace they had built. The breaking point came during the town's annual harvest festival. Jedediah, wanting to give the children a break from the ranch and show Sarah some support, decided to take them all to the celebration. But as they walked through the crowded streets, they were met with stares, whispers, and outright hostility. Some townsfolk openly shunned them, turning their backs as they passed. Others made snide remarks, loud enough for them to hear. One woman even approached Lily, telling her that her father was making a mistake and that Sarah was not a proper influence. Jedediah, his face flushed with anger, had had enough. He gathered his children around him, took a deep breath, and addressed the crowd, his voice booming across the town square. "I know there's been a lot of talk about Sarah and our arrangement," he said, his eyes blazing with righteous indignation. "I know some of you don't approve, but I'm here to tell you that I don't care what you think." He paused, his gaze sweeping across the faces of the townsfolk. "Sarah is a good woman," he continued, his voice softening slightly. "She's kind, compassionate, and she cares for my children as if they were her own. She has brought love, laughter, and light back into our lives. And I won't stand by and let you people judge her or treat her with disrespect." He straightened his shoulders, his chin held high. "Our arrangement is based on mutual respect and love for these children," he declared. "There's nothing shameful or improper about it. We are family, and we will support each other, no matter what anyone else says." He looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with love and gratitude. "And if you can't accept that," he said, his voice filled with defiance, "then you can just stay away from us." With that, he turned and led his children away, leaving the stunned townsfolk to stare after them in silence. He had made his choice, and he was prepared to face the consequences. He would defend Sarah's honor, protect his children, and build a life based on love and respect, regardless of what anyone else thought. After Jedediah's bold declaration, a shift occurred within the ranch. The air, previously thick with unspoken feelings, began to clear. The shared glances lingered longer, the casual touches became more frequent, and the conversations delved deeper. Despite their initial agreement to maintain a platonic relationship, a genuine connection had been steadily growing between Sarah and Jedediah. They had started as strangers, bound together by circumstance and compassion, but they had become friends, confidants, and now, something more. Jedediah found himself drawn to Sarah's inner strength, her unwavering optimism, and her ability to find joy in the simplest of things. He admired her nurturing spirit, her dedication to his children, and her genuine kindness. He loved her laughter, her smile, and the way her eyes sparkled when she was with his family. Sarah, in turn, found herself drawn to Jedediah's honesty, his integrity, and his unwavering love for his children. She admired his strength, his resilience, and his ability to overcome adversity. She loved his gentle nature, his quiet strength, and the way he made her feel safe and protected. They started spending more time together, working side by side on the ranch, sharing meals under the stars, and talking late into the night. They discovered shared interests, similar values, and a deep understanding of each other's pain and struggles. One evening, as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset, Jedediah reached for Sarah's hand. Their fingers intertwined, and a spark ignited between them. They looked at each other, their eyes filled with unspoken longing. "Sarah," Jedediah said softly, his voice filled with emotion. He hesitated, unsure of how to express his feelings. Sarah smiled gently, her eyes shining with love. "I know, Jedediah," she whispered. "I feel it too." And in that moment, under the vast expanse of the western sky, they acknowledged the truth that had been growing between them. They were falling in love. As their love deepened, Sarah found herself wrestling with the ghosts of her past. The pain of her parents' betrayal, the shame of her infertility, and the lingering feelings of worthlessness resurfaced, threatening to undermine her newfound happiness. She confided in Jedediah, sharing her deepest fears and insecurities. She told him about the doctor's grim pronouncement, about her parents' desperation, and about the humiliation of being sold like livestock. She confessed that she still struggled to believe that she was worthy of love, that she could ever be a truly happy woman. Jedediah listened patiently, his heart aching for her pain. He held her close, offering words of comfort and reassurance. He reminded her of all the good she had brought into his life and the lives of his children. He told her that she was strong, resilient, and beautiful, both inside and out. "Sarah," he said, his voice filled with sincerity, "your past doesn't define you. You are not your infertility. You are not your parents' mistakes. You are a remarkable woman, and you deserve to be happy." He vowed to stand by her, to support her, and to help her heal from her past traumas. He showed her, through his words and actions, that he believed in her, that he loved her unconditionally, and that he would never abandon her. With Jedediah's unwavering support, Sarah began to confront her past. She allowed herself to feel the pain, to acknowledge the hurt, and to release the negative emotions that had been holding her captive for so long. She started to see herself through Jedediah's eyes as a woman of strength, compassion, and worth. She realized that her infertility did not diminish her value as a person. She had so much to offer the world: her love, her kindness, her nurturing spirit. And she knew that, with Jedediah by her side, she could overcome anything. She could finally embrace her future with hope and confidence. The healing had begun. One starlit night, after the children were asleep, Jedediah led Sarah to the highest point on the ranch, a place where they could see the entire valley spread out before them. The air was crisp and clean, the silence broken only by the gentle chirping of crickets. He took her hands in his eyes filled with a love that shone brighter than any star. "Sarah," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "I brought you here tonight because I have something important to ask you." He paused, taking a deep breath to steady his nerves. "When you came to the ranch, I only intended for you to be a caretaker for my children," he continued. "I never imagined that I could feel this way again, that I could ever love another woman after Martha." He squeezed her hands gently. "But you have changed everything, Sarah. You have brought light and laughter back into my life. You have shown me what it means to love and be loved again. You have made my children whole, and you have made me a better man." He dropped to one knee, pulling a small, tarnished ring from his pocket, Martha's ring. "Sarah, I know that we had an agreement, that we said there would be no marital expectations. But I can't deny my feelings any longer. I love you, Sarah. I love you more than words can say." He looked up at her, his eyes pleading. "Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Not because you feel obligated, not because you think it's the right thing to do, but because you love me too. Will you marry me, Sarah, and become my partner, my wife, and my best friend?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears, tears of joy, tears of relief, tears of pure, unadulterated happiness. She had waited her whole life to hear those words, to feel that kind of love, to know that she was truly wanted and cherished. "Yes, Jedediah," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." Jedediah's face lit up with a radiant smile. He stood up, pulled her into his arms, and kissed her with a passion that took her breath away. The kiss was a promise, a commitment, a celebration of their love and their future together. He slipped the ring on her finger, the tarnished metal feeling like the most precious jewel in the world. It was a symbol of their love, a reminder of their journey, and a promise of a lifetime of happiness. They embraced under the starlit sky, their hearts overflowing with joy. Sarah had found her home, her family, and her true love. She had overcome her past, confronted her fears, and embraced a future she never thought possible. The news of their engagement spread quickly through the town. Some remained skeptical, whispering doubts and casting judgmental glances. But others, witnessing the genuine love between Sarah and Jedediah, began to soften their hearts. They saw the happiness that Sarah had brought to the ranch, the love she had for the children, and the positive impact she had had on the community. The wedding was a simple affair, held in the meadow behind the ranch, surrounded by their closest friends and family. Lily, Samuel, Caleb, Joshua, and Ruth stood by their side, beaming with pride and joy. As Sarah and Jedediah exchanged vows, promising to love and cherish each other for all eternity, Sarah knew that she had finally found her place in the world. She was loved, she was valued, and she was home. Her new beginning was here. A few months after the wedding, Sarah noticed a change in her body. She was tired more often, and she experienced a strange wave of nausea in the mornings. At first, she dismissed it as exhaustion from the demanding ranch life. But as the weeks passed, the symptoms persisted, and a familiar hope began to flicker in her heart. She confided in Lily, who had become her closest confidant. Lily, wise beyond her years, listened patiently and then gently suggested that Sarah might be pregnant. Sarah scoffed at the idea, reminding Lily of her infertility. But Lily insisted that miracles could happen and that anything was possible. Hesitantly, Sarah consulted the town doctor, the same gruff but honest man who had delivered the devastating news years ago. He examined her thoroughly, his expression unreadable. Finally, he looked at her, a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Well, Sarah," he said, his voice softer than she remembered, "it seems that you're in for a surprise. You're pregnant." Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her stomach. Tears welled up in her eyes, tears of disbelief, tears of joy, tears of overwhelming gratitude. A miracle had happened. After years of longing and heartbreak, she was finally going to have a child of her own. She rushed back to the ranch, her heart pounding with excitement. She found Jedediah tending to the horses, his face weathered and lined, but his eyes filled with love. She ran into his arms, burying her face in his chest. "Jedediah," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're going to have a baby." Jedediah's face broke into a wide, joyous grin. He lifted Sarah into his arms, spinning her around, his laughter echoing through the valley. He had never been happier. He was going to be a father again, and he was going to share this incredible journey with the woman he loved. The news of Sarah's pregnancy spread like wildfire, reaching even the most skeptical corners of the community. Some still harbored doubts, but most were genuinely happy for Sarah and Jedediah. They had proven that love, compassion, and second chances could conquer even the harshest realities of the West. Sarah gave birth to a healthy baby girl, a beautiful child with her mother's kind eyes and her father's strong spirit. They named her Martha, in honor of Jedediah's late wife, a tribute to the love that had paved the way for their own happiness. The ranch was now a bustling hub of activity, filled with the sounds of laughter, love, and the sweet cries of a newborn. Lily, Samuel, Caleb, Joshua, and Ruth doted on their baby sister, showering her with affection and helping Sarah in every way they could. Sarah looked around at her family, her heart overflowing with gratitude. She had come to the ranch broken and lost, sold by her own parents and stripped of her self-worth. But she had found love, acceptance, and a sense of belonging she never thought possible. She was a wife, a mother, and a valued member of her community. She had found her purpose, her happiness, and her true home. The family stood together, stronger than ever, a testament to the power of love, compassion, and second chances in the harsh West. They had faced adversity, overcome obstacles, and built a life filled with joy, laughter, and unwavering support. They were a family, bound together by love, and they were ready to face whatever the future held, together. The West could be harsh, but within their little ranch, they had created a haven of love and acceptance.